we counted your bruises, and you had like 55 bruises all over your body in different stages of healing.
In a world with facts that are possibly entertaining, we bring you today's episode of Fun Facts. Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Fun Facts. Today we're going to be talking about cancer. And the best way I can do that is to tell you about my personal experience I had with it when I was 5 years old. Being 5 years old, I needed someone to corroborate all my facts as my memory was a little bit fuzzy. So I called my mom, who's a licensed nurse practitioner, so you'll be hearing an awful lot from her throughout this video. Now every good story starts at the beginning, so we're going to tell you about the months before the diagnosis and all the treatments and symptoms going through that. So buckle down and get ready, because this is a long story.
I took you in for your 5-year checkup to the pediatrician, and I was, he was looking you over and everything, and you looked in your ears and said, oh, wow, he has an ear infection. And I was like, that's strange. He's never had that. He's never been sick in his life. He hasn't complained of his ears hurting or anything like that. And then he put you on the standard amoxicillin antibiotic and made an appointment for, I think it was 3 weeks later.
Now, when I was 5 years old, I was built like a barrel, and I probably rolled down a hill like one too. To give you an example of how rambunctious I was, when I was even younger, my belly used to stick out quite a bit farther than my face, and I thought it was extremely entertaining to run up to the wall at full speed and bounce off with my belly. And my parents would laugh.
I took you back into the regularly scheduled checkup, and you had an ear infection in both ears. So you were antibiotic naive, and we put you on the most common antibiotic for kids for an ear infection, and it didn't work. But he put you on a different antibiotic and then made another appointment for, 3 weeks later to check you out.
Now, after this second visit, we really started to notice other signs and symptoms that was going on. For example,
I think one time we counted your bruises, and you had like 55 bruises all over your body. And something else that happened during that time, you and Lindsay and I, we took a ride over to apartment complex.
On the bikes, I remember that.
And about halfway there, you were like, I can't, I'm so tired, I can't do it. And I was like, oh, Hunter, come on. I was, and you don't know how much guilt I had after that.
That's okay, Mom.
So we finally made it over there, and we decided that there was no way you could make it back. So Lindsay and I rode back and got the car and drove over and picked you up. And then there was another time during that 3-week period before we went back that we were over swimming in a swimming pool. I noticed that it looked like one side of your face was kind of drooping, or you were smiling and it looked like you had a lopsided smile. And so I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So I was like, Hunter, smile. And it was like, like you had a stroke or something.
Oh, jeez.
I know. And I was almost ready to take you to the ER when it went away. And you'd been losing weight because you hadn't been eating very well. You were getting skinny, and you were never like that. You were a good stocky boy.
Yeah.
Healthy, stocky, active. We've been on many bike rides before.
Mm-hmm.
And you were never tired like that.
Now, we were headed to the doctor the very next day, so we got that taken care of. But you'll notice I'm letting my mother tell this story. She just has more information than me and can tell a better story. So, you're welcome.
So we went back in for our 3-week appointment, And I told the doctor all this. He was like, "Ooh, well, that's kind of a lot of stuff going on." He was like, let's draw some blood. And I was like, okay. His office was across the street from Shawnee Mission Hospital. And so we had to go to the lab over there. So we went over there and they drew your blood. And before we went over there, I asked the nurse, I said, so the kids are supposed to go to the Omaha rainforest with their grandparents. And it was summertime. And so Grandma and Grandpa just wanted to kind of give me a break. I did finals and so, and you guys were always so good when I had to study. I mean, seriously. But, and of course we wouldn't have been able to do anything if it weren't for Aunt Holly.
Yeah.
I mean, she watched you guys, made you drink your milk, all that stuff. Lindsay will never forget that because she doesn't like, she's actually lactose intolerant to this day. But anyway, I asked the nurse before we left the office to go over to have your blood drawn, I said, they're supposed to be going on this little trip with their grandma and grandpa. Do you think it's okay to go ahead and let them leave? Because they're all packed and ready to go. And she was like, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. So got your blood drawn, went back home, grandma and grandpa were there, got you guys packed up, and then we said goodbye.
Proceeding forward, this story is going to become a little bit emotionally taxing, really quite a few medical references, and if that makes your stomach weak, I suggest you skip this part, or have a friend listen to it and make them give you a summary.
Maybe 20 or 30 minutes later. Can't remember the exact time, but then I got the call from the doctor's office. And he said, well, you had an intuition about his face drooping. And I was like, what?
Oh, no.
Because I was thinking, oh my God, you have a brain tumor. And I was like, what? And he goes, well, it looks like he has leukemia. And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, the problem is they just left with their grandma and grandpa. They were going to go camping. And so you don't make a reservation to go camping. So I had no idea where they were going, or I was freaking out. I was so upset. And so I had a cell phone. I just got it for safety reasons because, like in the winter time when I was going all the way to Topeka, if something happened, I could easily call somebody. And Gramps and JoJo had a landline.
Yeah.
So I called Gramps and I explained to him what was happening, and he said he would get in touch with the highway patrol, give them a description of the car, and so I was like, oh my gosh, okay, well, so I took off kind of in a frantic, because the doctor had said you need to get to Children's Mercy as soon as you can. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Because you never think that's going to happen to your child.
I want to take a quick moment to mention that this isn't a sob story or anything. We're not trying to make you feel bad for us. This is just information that we wanted to pass on in case you were curious or had any questions. I want to mention that without going through this, I wouldn't be the person I am today. So I'm thankful for those experiences because I wouldn't be me without them.
So then I just took off. I was speeding like the whole time. And I was going kind of the normal route. So I asked Gramps, I said, do you think that Dad would have taken the the scenic route? And he's like, yeah, probably. And as I was going, I was looking at all of these gas stations that were off to the right side of the highway, and I was trying to look at the cars that were parked there, but they also had parking in back of the gas stations, and I was like, oh my God, what if they're parked in the back or something? And I just was freaking out, but I kept going and just kept trying to look at the gas stations in case you guys had stopped for one of you to go to the bathroom or something. And I was just zooming along, just upset as ever. And all of a sudden, I went past kind of an interchange, and I was like, oh my gosh, did I just miss the turnoff that I was supposed to take? And so I was getting ready to call Gramps and ask him if that was the turnoff, and then I was going to turn around. This was a 100% a God thing, Hunter. There you guys were, right up ahead. And so, I got up behind you, or maybe behind and in front, and I was flashing my lights and all of this stuff. So they finally, they pulled over. Of course, they didn't have a cell phone because you know how they were technologically challenged.
Yeah.
And so I pulled them over, and they were like, oh my goodness, what are you doing here? And so I told them.
So this would be the actual moment that I was informed that I had cancer. Being 5 years old, I'm not totally sure I understand. I'm pretty sure I didn't at all. But later on is when I actually understood something was wrong.
I tried to just tell you in a way that a 5-year-old would understand. And so I was like, Hunter, from your blood, they found out that you have a blood cancer. And with cancer, a lot of times you have to get medication. You have to go into the hospital and get medication for it. That's called chemotherapy. And so.
Hey, do you remember how I reacted to you telling me I had cancer? What was I just like, okay?
Yeah, you didn't know any better. You were 5 years old.
Okay.
I mean, what the hell? You had no idea.
And then.
And I think it was also because we were like, Hunter, it's just gonna, you're just gonna have to get some medicine, and they'll, some chemotherapy. They'll give you medicine, so it won't make you sick. Well, it'll, I think we probably said so it won't make you sick. But, in reality, it's like, to try to help so you don't get sick.
Yeah.
I would say, we were about 30 to 40 minutes outside of Kansas City. So we drove back and we went straight to Children's Mercy. They had to do a bone marrow biopsy to definitively diagnose the leukemia. So the only problem was that you'd had snacks and stuff, so they can't numb the area and give you the Versed, which is what they usually gave you, which is an amnesic. So you still feel the pain, but you don't remember it. So it's like it never happened.
Yeah.
So they had to start doing that for kids because kids were getting PTSD from having their bone marrow biopsies done.
In case you're not completely familiar with the terms bone marrow biopsy or spinal tap, which you'll be hearing soon, we're going to go ahead and explain that for you real quick.
Bone marrow biopsy, you had to lay on your stomach, but it's the iliac crest, which is like the flat part of your hip bone.
Yeah.
And that's where they do the bone marrow biopsy. And then, of course, the spinal tap is between your vertebrae. It's like tapping a tree for maple syrup.
Jesus.
But they just put a needle in there, and your spinal fluid just drips drips out into a test tube.
Jesus.
And then they take that and they test it to make sure that your cerebral spinal fluid doesn't have cancer in it.
Okay, so to be a little bit more specific about the iliac crest, it's that flat part on your back right here, and they would insert a needle in there to get liquid out to check and see if you had any cancer in there. And for the spinal tap, you would have to curl up in the fetal position, and they would stick it in between your vertebrae and your back to test that one out as well. Not too fun. Back to the story.
And so you were all in position and everything, and he started doing it, and oh my gosh, I blanked this out because it was so traumatic, apparently, but Grandma remembered. And then she said, well, I just remember that your grandpa and I were standing out in the hall, and Hunter was yelling and crying, and I remember just being up kind of right by your ear, by your head, just telling you, it's okay, honey, I'm here with you right now. Dad'll be here on the weekend. You'll be okay, and trying to, calm you down. After she told me that original part, I was like, yeah, okay, I remember it now. But for a while there, I totally blanked it out. Basically, they had to do that every time. And then...
So I got a bone marrow and a spinal tap every 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Both of them?
Yep.
Jesus. My first bone marrow biopsy was probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. I remember it extremely well, and I'll paint you a small picture of it. Walking into a doctor's office with an off-green doctor's table, wooden legs, you lay down on that position we were talking of before so that they can stick a needle into that flat part of your hips in the back. As a child, I didn't know what was going on, so laying down, they were like, get ready. I was like, all right, I am. I was not at all. To put it the best way, I felt exactly like a bus was running over my back. It was incredibly difficult.
We went up to the floor, and they were going to need to put in a port, because that's the best way to get chemotherapy. And there was something about and this part I'm a little confused on, but it was called B-cell leukemia, and I think it was your thyroid was sort of swollen from that. It wasn't a tumor, but it was caused from the leukemia, and it was sort of, your thyroid was sort of swollen, and so they couldn't put the port in right away.
Yeah.
So they had to put it in through an IV. One time they actually had to put one in your foot until they could get your thyroid to shrink enough so that they could have a good airway so that you could go to surgery to have the port put in.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was only like maybe 2 or 3, and maybe 2. So they were going off of the pediatric, guidelines for just your regular, ALL. That was the most common childhood cancer that a kid could have. And when we were having the talk with Dr. Imami, he was kind of explaining to us, about it. And he was so good. He was saying, and Hunter, you're such a strong kid. You're going to do just fine. And we're going to, it'll be probably about 3 years of chemotherapy, and then you'll be good to go. And he was, that was his job, and he did it so well, and he spent as much time as we needed explaining answering all of our questions, and they never once treated me like I knew anything. And that was good because I because I didn't.
Yeah.
As far as, leukemia, childhood leukemia goes, I knew nothing. They were so great there, the nurses. And so you were in, because you were so immunocompromised, you were in the private BMT rooms that they had. It was actually an area where the door from the outside hallway has to seal, and it was about a positive airflow. It had to, go through this cleaning cycle, and then until it beeped us into the room that it was all clear. I think it was the first probably month and a half when your thyroid had gone down enough to, it was about that length of time before they could get the port put in. And it was just a single port,
So far, we've gone through the diagnosis, and we're about a month and a half into the hospital here. We're going to leave it there for part 1 of this fun fact episode, and part 2 will be coming out soon. If you have questions and comments, as always, leave them down below, and we'll see you on the next episode.